In this video, we examine the fundamental concepts of statistics. Many of those fundamental statistical concepts are interrelated, and it may be difficult to explain one without relying on another. So in this lesson, we will have a very short description of those fundamental concepts that will help us progress in our other lessons. Firstly, consider that statistics is the science of data, and data is collected on individuals or units in a target population. We may have population data. That means that for every individual in the target population, we manage to collect data. This is likely expensive and time-consuming, and it may even be impossible. However, it will provide us with exact knowledge about the intended target population. When this is not an option, instead we collect sample data. That means that we collect data for only some individuals in the target population. This is obviously cheaper and faster. However, we only obtain information about the sample, and it gives us an incomplete picture of the entire target population. That means that if we want to make a conclusion about the target population, it will have to come with some probabilistic statement representing that level of uncertainty. When you see a report from a study, the study might be providing you with the raw data or summary data. The raw data is a record of the data collected on each individual in the study. In statistics, we make an important distinction between summaries of the data that correspond to population data versus sample data. Specifically, we say that a summary value representing an entire population's worth of data is a parameter, whereas a summary value for sample data is called a statistic. Raw data should be organized in such a way that the individuals have a unique identifier, perhaps it's their name or a label or a number. Then all the data recorded for any given individual is stored into one row of the data table, and each variable is recorded into its own column. This is a data set based on a class survey of UCI students. The students anonymously provided information about their height, their gender, their weight, their eye colors, and then based on information about height and weight, I was able to calculate their body mass index value. Some of the variables consist of numerical values representing a measurement on the individual, the height, weight, and body mass index, whereas others represent a description of the individual, a feature, characteristic, gender, and eye color. We will come back to these datasets a number of times in those class videos. As we have just seen, there are two big types of variables: quantitative variables and categorical variables. We have a quantitative variable when a meaningful numerical value is recorded for each individual in the dataset. And you know that you have a meaningful numerical value for each individual when you can average those values over the whole dataset, for instance. On the other hand, a variable is categorical if a qualitative description, a feature, is recorded for each individual in the dataset. A typical summary for categorical variable would be counting the number of individuals that have a particular feature. Lastly, we will come across two major types of statistical studies: observational studies and experimental studies. In observational studies, data is recorded on the individuals without making any attempt to influence the data recorded. In contrast, in experimental studies, different treatments are deliberately imposed on the individuals so that we can see how those treatments may influence the data recorded on the individuals. Observational studies are often limited in the scope of their conclusions, and it may be very difficult to reach a conclusion of causation. That's because regardless of how many variables you record, many more exist and potentially can also influence the variables you are recording. On the plus side, observational studies tend to be very realistic because no attempt is made to influence the system. Experiments, on the other hand, allow us to control factors that might be influential, and because different treatments are assigned to different individuals at random, are not themselves associated with any other influential factor, which means that a conclusion of causation may be possible. On the other hand, experimental settings can easily be simplistic or unrealistic because so much of it is just controlled.